Hi, and welcome back to Bill's Cichlid Room. How many times have you bought a pair of fish, brought them home, settled them into the aquarium, and they've started spawning straight away? Or you've moved a pair of fish from one aquarium to another and they've started spawning straight away? Well, let's have a look at some of the well-known spawning triggers. This is my pair of nicaraguensis. They're F1, these ones. The wild ones were caught by Max from Max Cichlids in Rio San Juan in Costa Rica. So I've had these for about 16 months now. They've been in a different tank and they've never shown any signs of spawning. So what I did during the Christmas break, I actually moved some fish around in the fish room. So I moved the pair that I had into this tank, and I had a spare female as well, so I put the spare female in this tank as well. Lo and behold, what happened is the male paired up with the spare female, and within a couple of days they'd actually laid eggs in the pot. Also going on in this tank, there's the nicaraguensis, so they've actually got a spawn at the moment as well. So as you can see, on day 2, what the parents had done, the female I believe, she'd actually moved all the eggs out of the pot to the side of the pot. Why she did this, I've got no idea. But I was planning on doing a day-by-day video until I actually got wrigglers, and then I was going to move the wrigglers out, put them into a grow-out tank and grow some on. Unfortunately, after on the 3rd day when I went down to the fish room, all the eggs had gone, so I don't know whether the parents have ate them or whether the rainbow cichlids have ate them or the nicaraguensis have ate them, but something's ate them. But it got me thinking about spawning triggers, hence today's video. So spawning triggers, what you need to actually get going to get your cichlids breeding. First of all, of course, you need a mature pair, a male and female, and then you need the right conditions. So what I found is sometimes if the fish aren't spawning by themselves, if you change the water parameters ever so slightly, that can trigger them into spawning. So when I mean change the water parameters, there's a few things that you can do. One of them, you can change the amount of water that you actually change when you're doing a water change. So this mimics the season variations in the wild. It's particularly true for South American cichlids, those cichlids from the Amazon, like the apistos, discus, angels. It can work really well with those. But one of the ways of doing it is, if you normally do a 30 to 40% water change every week, change it, do 20% twice a week. So what will happen is it mimics the rainy season. So the fish, if they're not that far from wild, it'll be in the genetics that they, theoretically they do actually know what the season varieties are in the wild. And the other thing that it does as well, if you actually do a water change with cold water, you're fluctuating the temperature. So I do all my water changes with cold water. So the temperature of the tank goes down from about 78 degrees Fahrenheit to around about 65 when I do a water change, and then obviously it comes back up. But what tends to happen is within a couple of days of doing the water change, it's not unheard of for me to have quite a few spawnings. The other thing that happens, of course, when you're doing a water change, you are changing the pH and the hardness of the water ever so slightly. Here in Liverpool, the water comes out the tap with a pH of neutral, around about 7, and it's quite soft water. Now what happens if you leave it in the tank for a few days, the pH does start to drop unless you've got things in there to buffer it. That's why you'll see in a lot of my tanks I have like limestone or like crushed coral or something like that in there just to buffer the water to stop the pH from crashing. But doing a big water change, it will change the pH, which can also act as a spawning trigger. Another good spawning trigger is the change in the barometric pressure. So what happens sometimes if you've got a storm coming, the barometric pressure does actually drop. So if you combine this with a water change, again it mimics a storm in the wild, and that can start spawning. I know a lot of the Corydorus breeders do this. So if they see on the weather report that there's a storm coming, they do massive water changes and keep the fingers crossed that they do get some spawns. But yeah, it can work really well. So all these ones that I've spoke about up to now, they're all sort of mimicking what happens in the wild, but there are some other spawning triggers that you can use as well. Another spawning trigger that works really well is if you change the territories in the aquarium. So as you can see from my tanks, I do normally have them spread out into territories, so the pairs of fish can actually claim a territory, spawn in at a pot or behind a rock or behind the bogwood, and actually defend it. So if you change some of those around, move some of the pots around, move some of the rocks around, you're actually changing the territories in the tank. And then what you'll find is the fish actually do compete for an area. So just the change in territories can sometimes trigger spawning. Changing the tank mates as well, so moving fish around from aquarium to aquarium, this can work really well. So I believe this is what's happened in this instance with the nicaraguensis. So what I did is I had some carpinters that were ready to move on into another tank, but the tank I wanted to move them into had the nicaraguensis in there, so I moved the nicaraguensis out and moved the carpinters into the other tank. So it gave me the opportunity of putting the spare female in with the pair that I had, and as you can see, it has done the deed. So I think it's a combination of everything. It's a combination of the change of territories, slight change in the water parameters, change your tank mates and change your partners, and it's worked really well this time. Another point which is a bit controversial really, but I actually do believe it, it's pheromones in the water. So what I find sometimes is, if you've got a pair of fish that are already breeding in a tank, and in this instance it was the nicaraguensis, and when they're spawning, I believe they actually do let off pheromones within the aquarium, and that can kickstart some of the other pairs into starting to spawn. If you remember last year I did a video where I had 4 pairs of rainbow cichlids all breeding in the same tank, all at the same time. So I think that's what had happened. I think the pheromones had actually kicked it all off. Another thing that you can do to trigger them into spawning, it's condition the pairs. So you can change the food, the diet. So if you're normally feeding pellets or flakes, if you switch to live food or frozen food, just the change of diet can sometimes trigger them into spawning. Another thing that some people believe, I'm not so sure on it myself, but I have been told this on a number of occasions. If you're hatching baby brine shrimp, if you actually put some of that into a tank with parents, it's almost as if the parents believe that if they do spawn, there is going to be a food source there for the fry. So that can act as a trigger spawn. As I say, I'm not so sure on this, but I know some friends and that from fish clubs, they do believe this. And another thing that you can do, and this works well with aggressive cichlids, if you actually use a divider. So if you keep the male and the female separate for a while and then put them together, if you put them into a tank without a divider, what can happen is the male can pick on the female, batter her up, and in the worst instance you can actually lose the female. So if you use the divider method, so a bit of egg crate, so the male and the female can actually see each other and they get used to each other being there. And then there's a couple of ways you can go. Sometimes if you put a stone on the female side of the tank next to the divider, she will actually lay eggs and the male can come over and actually fertilise the eggs. I know this is a method that Andy Woods has had a lot of success with. I tried it when I had the Humaguba and success with it. I did actually have the female laying eggs, which she hadn't done before, but yeah, the male never ever fertilised them. But it is a method that you can use. The other one is the hole in the divider method, where you cut a hole in the divider so the female can fit through and the male can't. So if the female feels threatened, she can just swim back over onto her other side. Again, this is a method that quite a lot of people use with a lot of success. Sometimes as well that can happen if you use the hole in the divider method. If they get used to each other being there, you can actually remove the divider and they get on fine. As long as the female's got somewhere that she can go to if she feels threatened, like a bit of pipe or behind a bit of bogwood. It is a good way of doing it and getting them used to each other. Hope you found some of the spawning triggers useful. If you've got any others, put it in the comments and let me know. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, press the notification button, and I'll see you all on the next video.